We are back with another Tuesday Rotoworld Baseball Show Q&A. It's Eric Samulski, James Schiano. What's up, everybody?
Hey guys, how you doing?
James, we got how are you feeling? We had some blown saves from the Mets. We had some tough losses against the Astros. The last night looked like you may be headed down the same path, but they pulled it out.
No, the Mets during the Diaz suspension, it's like I don't even hold the bullpen accountable for anything. It's just get to the end of any game you possibly can and hope to win it. Thankfully, they scored like 6 runs in the 10th inning yesterday to be able to hold on narrowly. But it's just while you're playing down a man, it's like 10 days of a power play for the other team. It's really hard.
Yeah, especially when that's an end of game option, right? It's a specialized closer. It's somebody who comes in when you have the lead. It's somebody who comes in those high leverage spots. It's tough. It's tough having to adjust to that for sure. Let's talk about the big story of the day as we let people get their questions in. Remember that you can ask questions at any point on YouTube. If you want to hit us up on Twitter, you can ask questions, but we can't display those live on screen, so that may be less fun. You can ask questions if you're watching on Twitch. So there's a lot of ways to ask questions. I know it's 4th of July week. And so some of you may already be at the beach or, in the country somewhere. I hope you're enjoying your time. I hope you're relaxing. I hope everybody gets a little time to unplug as the week and weekend go on. But we are going to talk baseball. And we should just talk about the big man who was called up yesterday, James Wood. Made his debut. I know you watched the game, the Nationals and Mets game. Obviously, he didn't light up the scoreboard there, but there were some interesting things where you saw some of the athleticism on that error to short, where then he was able to kind of like had the wheels to go and turn it into not a double, but you know what I mean, reach second base. There's plus athleticism. Who knew that was hard to say? For his size, seems like he's going to get like a lot of run for the Nationals. Had made really good improvements on the strikeout rate in the minor leagues this year. This may be the biggest impact bat we see get called up for the fantasy season, at least. Who knows what's going to happen with Junior Caminero, but he'd be the only other option, I would assume.
Yeah, and I think that even if Junior Caminero gets called up, just knowing how the Rays operate and kind of seeing where they are in the standings, it feels like James Wood has more of a extended opportunity. He did a lot of tiny things in the game yesterday I thought were just really impressive from someone so young playing the first major league game. And his first at bat against David Peterson, who's not like a tough lefty by any stretch of the imagination. He is a lefty up against a lefty, James Wood, and he fought off some tough pitches and he was down 1-2, worked the count back to full, and then got his sinker in the heart of the zone that he was able to weirdly take the other way for a single, but he still smoked the ball, but weird that he couldn't like get around that pitch. I think he might have been, I don't know, I think he might be setting breaking ball, but reacted to the sinker and still got the hit. And then in the 10th inning of the game, when the Nationals were trying to rally down by a lot of runs and they were facing Tyler J, who by every extent is probably just about as good as most of the pitching that James Woods faced in AAA this year. Jay threw him 5 pitches. None of them were reasonably in the strike zone. One of them just barely nabbed the edge. And James Wood let all 5 pitches go by, didn't try to be a hero, didn't try to do too much, took his walk and kept the Nationals rally going to keep going. And those kind of like slowing the game down things are what makes James Wood so enticing after that first career game.
Yeah, and those are things that are advanced for that age too. Make sure you check your leagues and see if he's available. NFBC formats where a player needs to debut before they can be added. He may still be available in some of your leagues if somebody hadn't been drafting him and stashing him. I know he's still available in 2 of my NFBC leagues, so like I already went ahead and put in some bids just so I don't forget on Sunday, because I think that happens a lot, right? Where you see something on a Monday and you're like, oh, I got to make sure I remember. And sometimes you just forget. So make sure you go in and do that. Eddie says, good afternoon. And good afternoon, Eddie.
What's up, Eddie?
Glad to have you here again. Dave is asking if we're worried about Noel V Marte. Now, I think Dave's concern about Noel V Marte is beyond just the current production that he's giving us at the major league level, because he hasn't really been up for that long. Noel V Marte has played just 4 games for the Reds this year. He is 3 of 17. That's a 176 batting average, 4 strikeouts, no walks. The issue was also that in 12 games at AAA, he was hitting 151 with a 28% strikeout rate, no walks, one steal. So he hasn't been playing well at all this year. Granted, it's just 16 total games in AAA and the majors. Do you have any level of concern here at all?
I guess for the rest of the season, there's definitely some concern, but it's just there's this much concern until he has a 2 home run game in Great American Ballpark, and then a lot of it gets washed away. I'm encouraged by the fact that he had a 2 stolen base game already too. I think it was his first or second game back, or has at least 2 steals in general. So I like that, and it's just I don't know. It's probably a weird thing to get suspended for PEDs and try to come back and work your way through and try to get. It's like that's probably a strange mental thing to get past. And he has a starting role. He has one of the best parks in the league to hit in. He's only 22 years old. You might not get like 10 or 12 team production the rest of the year out of Noel V Marte, but I don't think it's anything to be concerned with. Like when you elongate this for the long term, he's still just a beast.
Yeah, and I think like listen, there was some BABIP inflated batting average last year when he was hitting 316 at the major league level, but at the minor leagues he's been a pretty solid like 280 type of hitter, and so I don't see any reason why, even if you deflate that a little bit at the big league level and you're getting maybe like 270 batting average from Noel V Marte, like we know the speed is there to steal 20 plus bases over a full season. We know the lineup is good. We know that the park is good. So yeah, maybe you're getting a 270 hitter who is, not a huge power threat, but can steal bases on a team that is going to run. So that still has value. I will say, like I talked about this with Scott Pianowski on the podcast yesterday. One of the leagues that I'm in where Noel V Marte was available, I also had Manny Machado as my third baseman. And then during the season had picked up Vientos and Jose Miranda to fill, Vientos is first base eligible, so he was able to fill a corner. But those are 3 third basemen. And I honestly didn't even put in a bid for Marte because I wasn't going to drop Vientos for Marte. I'm not going to drop Jose Miranda for Marte. Miranda's hitting really well right now. I didn't need the speed, which is part of that, right? Because I could see playing Marte over Miranda if you want the speed, but like, I don't think Marte is a slam dunk. You have to have him. Like he is a good high upside player, but there have been some third basemen that popped on waiver wires this season. And if you added one of those guys, like I wouldn't be dropping a Vientos to get Noel V Marte.
Definitely not. Vientos is closer to the All-Star game right now than he is to Noel V Marte in like a fantasy sense. And I think there's a little bit of insight too. Noel V Marte has only seen 65 pitches this year, so this is no kind of sample size, but and it also just could be determined by the types of pitcher he's faced. But he's seen almost twice as many sliders as 4-seam fastball so far, with a lot of sinkers. So I think he just has faced an inordinate amount of sinkers, but just seeing that many more sliders compared to fastballs in general probably says a lot about the way teams are going to approach pitching to him. Just give him a lot of junk and see if he chases.
Yeah, and we'll see, how that goes with him. But again, adding him if you're able to makes some sense. Keep him on the bench, see what happens. Dad is back. And he says George Springer is on a little bit of a heater in the last week. 11 of 21, 4 runs scored, 10 RBIs, 1 steal, 22 total bases. Are we hopeful that he'll be productive rest of season? Where are you at, James, on George Springer?
That's another one where it's like, yeah, I think he'll be productive rest of season, but if you're playing in a 10-team league, it's like I don't know if he's productive enough to be worthwhile. And this heater was basically like 2.5 games where he had like a lot of regression at one time, and he's still getting on base. Kind of, he's like the fact that his average is under 220, his on base percentage is over 300. Like there's still a good amount of plate discipline there, and he's still tracking with a hot streak for almost a 2020 season. Like that's all really good. You're just missing a lot of the rate stats and the real contact you used to get from George Springer not being necessarily draining your batting average. But I don't know. I can't really believe that he's like back to a George Springer that we expected to be. Like the regression seemed real. He is 34 years old, and that team is a black hole right now. So I don't think there's any hope for them to all pull themselves out of it. It's just, again, I think he's now back to being fine, but not someone I'm necessarily relying on. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I had kind of given up almost in a sense. I just like it was not looking good, and I had him on my roster forever this year, and I felt like he was getting really hittable pitches. He was not swinging and missing a lot. He was beating the ball into the ground because he's getting thrown low into the zone a lot, and he's just kind of like rolling over ground balls and not able to lift anything. And for me, it was just like, I thought his value was in being a lot of his value is being a leadoff hitter on what we thought was going to be a good offense. Now he's hitting in the bottom third of a lineup that is probably mediocre and might even trade away players and get worse. I don't really see right now why they would bump him back to the leadoff spot unless he does this for like an more extended period of time. And I don't know. I think he's more of a 15-15 guy now.
If I had to ask you, would you rather rest of the season? Would you rather George Springer or Spencer Horowitz?
It's a really good question. And I think it depends on
outfield, infield, of course, but
outfield, infield. Yeah. And yeah, because I think Horowitz's batting average is going to be much higher. I don't think that Horowitz is going to hit for as much power or run as much. But, I think George Springer is a 15-15 guy with a 270 batting average and a mediocre team. Like, that's who I think he is full season now. And I just don't think that's as exciting as we thought before.
And something that's probably a weird, not a benefit, but just an added consequence of George Springer moving down the lineup is that you used to be a guy you expected a lot of runs scored. Now you're probably just get significantly more RBIs. So that could just be a little contextual thing where if you're really chasing RBIs, like he could be someone that can sneaky help you in that category, hitting fifth in the Blue Jays lineup that does, while not great, has guys that get on base.
Right. Unless they
all get traded.
Right. Or the lineup continues to suffer a little bit. Who knows?
Yeah.
One of the big injuries this week was Bryce Harper. And so DVS is asking us here, in a Roto league that uses total bases and strikeouts, this person lost Betts, Tatis, and Harper. That's a tough break.
How'd you have them?
I don't know how that works unless we're talking about like a keeper league, and then that would make some sense. But anyway, just ranking replacements in a league that uses total bases. Taylor Ward, if he's okay after being hit in the head. I mean, this guy, he better be okay. Like, he apparently said he was okay after the game, but like having him get hit in the face last year and miss the whole rest of the season, and now that's unfortunate. Zach Neto, Andrew Vaughn, and Carlos Santana. How would you rank them?
Taylor Ward by far the best, as long as again he's okay after being hit in the head again. And then we've kind of given this guy a lot of flack the last few weeks doing this live stream, but weirdly, just if you're doing a total base league, like you might as well chase Carlos Santana, find some extra base hits there, especially as Andrew Vaughn's still good, but he's tapered off, and Neto, while awesome for the homers and the speed, is not exactly the most consistent hitter. And Ron Washington seems to just be putting him through the ringer and keeps hitting him 7th, 8th, or 9th in that lineup, despite him being likely one of their best overall players. So it's just, Ward by a lot. And then I'm weirdly Santana next. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Santana next for me, because the strikeout rate also is, right, this league counts Ks. Santana's like a 15% strikeout rate guy right now. He has never been over 20% in his entire career. So I'm assuming here when we're talking about hitters and using strikeouts that we're getting points taken off for strikeouts.
Yeah, you lose for strikeouts, I'm assuming, yeah.
And so I that's another feather in the cap of Santana, is that I think he's not going to hurt you in that regard. And then I would maybe go Neto over Vaughn, because I think Neto is like a 2020 guy. I'm assuming, this league still uses stolen bases, even though it's not listed here. So that would be my ranking. I would go Ward, Santana, Neto, Vaughn.
Yeah, something like that. I might Ward, Santana now. Yeah, I think I have the exact same.
Other roster news that happened today. Tim Anderson was DFA'd, which is a wild fall after being punched in the face by Jose Ramirez, that everything just seemed to totally collapse for Tim Anderson. And it happened so quick, but I think it might, this isn't like a blip, like it might be happening. Like he might be done. To me, I don't know what your takeaway is from this. Like, this doesn't move the needle for me at all. I know Xavier Edwards has a little bit of speed, and if you were in like an NL only format and he was going to play every day, like I could see that being interesting. Just trying to chase some stolen bases. But there's nothing here. There's nothing on the horizon that really intrigues me in terms of like filling in this gap for the Marlins. I don't assume that anybody was rostering Tim Anderson, or many people were rostering Tim Anderson in their league. So I don't know that you really have to like run out and find another shortstop. This just seems more like an interesting baseball thing that has little fantasy ramification.
Yeah, I strangely had Tim Anderson on my TGFBI team like 2 weeks ago because I was hopeless for steals and average. So I was like, I saw he had like that 10 good games in a row, and I was like, yeah, maybe Tim Anderson will just start to hit some singles. But Edwards he's not interesting in most leagues, but Zips and Steamer both project him for a WRC plus over 100 rest of season, which I think is kind of interesting. The Bad X and ATC hates him. ATC actually has him at 97, so right there, and it's just. You might have a chance to play. The whole reason Tim Anderson was mildly interesting to start the year was because the Marlins were abysmal as a lineup. So there's an opportunity there. So I don't know if you're in a points league that might devalue strikeouts. If you desperately need stolen bases, like Xavier Edwards he's not an impossible guy to put on your team.
Sure.
Yeah.
Other roster news that happened. DVS mentioned that Taylor J was sent down, and Budo is back up. And Anthony DeComo had a tweet out. Just as we kind of started this, that the Mets have talked about making Budo a reliever, at least temporarily, to help the bullpen. This doesn't seem to have any implications on Christian Scott coming up to rejoin the rotation, which seems like it is still going to happen. Budo in the bullpen. And then correct me if I'm wrong, this is your squad, but I feel like even if the Mets are going for it at the trade deadline, I don't know that it would be crazy to think about them dealing one of these older starting pitchers who is on a 1-year contract, like a Severino, like a Minaya, like a Quintana, and then taking Budo from the bullpen and moving him back into the rotation. And even if they're still competing for the wild card, you're getting something from a rental a rental starter that was signed.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This again doesn't seem like a huge fantasy action right now.
Shout out to DVS for giving me a nice dense Mets question. If him or anyone else here listens to the Mets Stuff podcast, they know I'm a huge fan of Budo and have been for a while. And interestingly enough, the Mets did this with Budo briefly last year. They used him a bit in long relief, like in middle relief, which is I think where they want to use him now, because with the Diaz suspension, and they had 2 off days last week, but on Friday they started a string of 17 games in 17 days. So they're kind of been able to finagle their rotation a little bit and thread the needle with four starters technically, with Tyler McGill being sent down and Scott coming up, and then you can grab Budo to kind of be that mop, that like glue guy in the bullpen. But he's someone who, in a relief role, not much fancy value. Maybe he gets an extended hold. He gets 1 hold in the next 3 games and he plays if you're dying for a hold. But he's someone I think the Mets are willing to trade out of their starting pitching depth because they believe that he could be worth a chance. But then Budo keeps having these issues when he gets to the major leagues where he almost gets I've seen him get a little tight where he has a very good changeup and then he has a fine fastball, but oscillations in its velocity kind of take it from very effective to not effective quickly. And he has a slider that he keeps working on, but sometimes he just loses it. And those last few starts in the majors, after he had a really good April, it was just walks and nibbling and throwing a lot of balls. He always finds a way to put his head down and get through more length than you'd expect. But I think his best future might be as one of these like 2-inning relief guys. Just max out that fastball, but you might still be able to get some volume innings out of him for at some point this summer. But his future is a little murkier, I think, than that, and probably is not even a hold in like a deep dynasty right now.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I'd be interested in him if he moved back into the rotation. There is a Mets pitcher that did move into the rotation. And we got this question for you from Pistol RX, which is Christian Scott or Matt Waldren. And this is a tough one.
That's hard.
Because for me right now, Matt Waldren is pitching well enough that I can't drop him. As much as I like Christian Scott. I'd love to have both these guys on my roster. I could not drop Matt Waldren to get Christian Scott. However, if you were asking me to bet on who's going to be more effective from like August 1st to the end of the season, I think it's going to be Christian Scott, because I have kind of been saying that like knuckleballs are really hard to rely on. And the other stuff that Waldron has, even though I know he has other pitches, it's all fairly average. So the knuckleball really is driving this success a lot. And the last start against Boston was like fine, not great. And it wouldn't surprise me if he runs into a really rough stretch and he becomes kind of just like a fine but not great starting pitcher for a guy who wasn't even on our radar coming into the year. And Christian Scott has a lot of upside as a prospect. And so I really do think he's in this rotation to stay now. And I could easily see him out producing Waldren.
I easily could too, but there's two things about Christian Scott where in terms of like full rest of the season value, it gets murky. In a short-term value, in small spurts, I think Christian Scott will be more valuable, but he didn't strike out nearly as many hitters in the major leagues. He did in the minor leagues when he came up for his first cup of coffee. And the Mets kind of claim that like pitch selection and being able to vary, especially the lefties, was the reason he got sent down. But I think realistically, they also were open. It was about workload. Christian Scott last year only got up to about 95 innings. So you have to consider this year that he probably just about has 120, maybe 130 in the tank if the Mets go on a run. And between both levels so far this year, he's already up to 70. So you're probably only getting 9 starts out of Christian Scott the rest of the season, where Waldren is just going to go out there and pitch. And again, weirdly enough, Scott and Waldren basically the exact same major league strikeout rate this year, between 22 and 23%. Scott walks fewer batters and he throws harder, and the upside probably is higher for those like splash games. Like Christian Scott can have a 3-start stretch where he maybe strikes out 30 batters. Like that could happen. Right. The stuff is there. The fastball's there. The sweeper's there. If the changeup comes around the lefties, it's all there. And the whip is going to be around 1. But Waldren's just in a groove right now. I think if you need something short term, if you need a pop, I think it's Scott. But if you're thinking about September, it's the guy who's there is probably just Waldren because of the innings limit on Scott.
That's an interesting way to look at it as well. But tough. I mean, you'd want both guys on your roster if capable. Totally. Depends who else is there. Other either or question with some young players.
That's a fun one.
Good Joe asks about Johnsky, Noel, and Garrett Mitchell. I found out that Noel's nickname is Big Christmas, which is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like I think it's one of the better nicknames in baseball because obviously Noel as his last name and the fact that he is a huge human being. For me, this is Mitchell though. Noel has a lot of swing and miss in his game. The power is absolutely for real, but like we saw when the Guardians called up Kyle Manzardo, that they're not going to force these prospects into the lineup if the guys aren't hitting well enough to be in the lineup every day. They're competing to take the AL Central. And so Noel has the upside to be a really good power asset at the big league level if he gets the chase in order. But they're not going to just keep running him out there and let him figure it out. Like he's going to have to force his way into the lineup. He's a right-handed hitter, so there's a good chance he could be a short side platoon bat for a long time. And we talked about like Garrett Mitchell. I think Garrett Mitchell has the power speed combo that's interesting enough. Like he's not Noel's type of power, but he was 4 homers, 4 steals in AAA over like 13 games. And I think the Brewers want him to be the everyday center fielder. He was going to be the everyday center fielder before getting hurt. And guys like Frelick and Blake Perkins, like they've been fine, but I don't know that in the long term, they're going to keep Mitchell out of the lineup. So I like Mitchell's ability to contribute in 5 categories in a pretty decent lineup in a good hitter's park. And so I would take him over Big Christmas.
Yeah, Big Christmas. I'm going to keep that one going. I agree. It's just Mitchell's so much safer. He offers so much more game. Him playing that good of defense will keep him on the field where Noel, the Guardians are basically like, let's try and get lightning in a bottle. He acts as something that the rest of that lineup doesn't have, which is someone who can just go up there, take a hack and mash, where they have a lot more soft tapper like guys around the field. Your Jimenez, your Freeman, your Rocchio. But Noel also, like, it's 50% strikeouts and only 14 plate appearances, but he already has 2 home runs and 14 plate appearances. Like, I don't know. Like, something will always pull back to that guy who can go on the impending hot streak rather than the guy who can, like, dribble to, like, 8 stolen bases and, like, 7 home runs to the end of the year. Like, it's just kind of about what kind of manager you are and what you think your team needs, if you want to do something crazy or if you want to be very safe and secure.
Yeah, like I picked up Noel in an OPS league because I wanted to see what happens. And obviously in an OPS league, that power plays a little bit more. But I think there's a real shot that he struggles and gets sent down. And so I wouldn't be going crazy here.
They could even trade him back for Manzardo in the minor leagues, like do another drive, because I think they just really want someone to take this job with power, and they're kind of seeing who does it.
Yeah. Couchad says Trevor Rogers has a 6-start streak of good results with middling underlying stats. Is this just luck, or has he successfully compensated for his strikeout woes by becoming a pitch to contact guy? I'll say this right now. Like, I don't think it's luck. He has done a really good job of like keeping the fastball up in the zone and keeping the breaking balls low in the zone, which, as you know from being a pitcher list guy, Nick Pollock loves to refer to as the Blake Snell blueprint. And it is what he's doing, and Rogers is doing a pretty good job of it. But like, if I just look at the stats from the 6 games, he has a 7.6% swinging strike rate over those 6 games. He has a 22.7% CSW. He has a 42% ideal contact rate, so he's still allowing a decent amount of hard contact. The strikeout rate is 15.8%, but the walk rate is 9%. So you're looking at like a 6.8% strikeout per walk, strikeout minus walk rate over that 6-start stretch. Nothing in that is exciting to me. And so, yeah, he has a 3.28 ERA over those 6 starts. And some of it has come against, like, it's not all cupcake matchups, like Cleveland, Texas, San Diego, Philadelphia. Like, there are some good matchups in there, but I just don't know what that gives you for fantasy upside, right? Like, you're not getting any strikeouts. You're getting a 121 whip is fine, but not like, oh my God, this is really helping my whip. You're not going to get many wins on the Marlins. So what you're hoping for is Trevor Rogers to keep pitching to contact to a low 3s ERA. And I just think that's a really low upside gamble for somebody who's giving up so much contact and not missing any bats.
Yeah. The one thing that he's done that's been tangible is you're seeing a lot more sinkers compared to fastballs, which is a change they looked like he was going to make in the spring. Then now his last few starts, he's kind of gone back and forth, but really it's just become more even distribution between the two because neither of them aren't tremendous. So you might as well try and keep every sided hitter off balance rather than just keep throwing the same thing to people on both sides of the plate. It's not exciting. It's just a guy that pitches in a really big home park and not something I don't think 2021 Trevor Rogers ever coming through that door again. I think that's probably what some people want, but this is just a guy who's more like in the Kyle Gibson range rather than someone with upside.
I might honestly rather have Kyle Gibson right now because Kyle Gibson is throwing a ton of sweepers and missing a lot more bats, and his team is better. So,
it's a tier thing, like how the approach to Trevor Rogers
for sure. We mentioned Carlos Santana before. Basebone asks Nathaniel Low or Carlos Santana in a 12-team 5x5 league.
I was having such a conversation with friends about Nate Low yesterday because there was like a big trade made a year ago in like one of my dynasty leagues where he was a piece that was moved, and manager was so excited about getting Nate Low basically as a throw-in, being like, we're getting this young first baseman who's coming of age in this great hitter's situation. It's just he looks abysmally bad right now. I don't think there's a way out of there. It kind of feels dirty to say I'd take Carlos Santana over him, but as this Rangers team continues to fall deeper and deeper into a hole, like you can't even say that Nate Low has a lineup advantage anymore. He's just the whole thing's being yanked down. I don't know if there's anything tangible in his profile. I'm trying to pull him up right now that it could tell me that something would change, but it's boring.
No.
Like weirdly, Carlos Santana.
No, I'm looking at his profile and no. So here's the thing. It's like, even historically speaking, what does Nate Low do better than Carlos Santana? It's batting average, right? That's the only thing historically speaking that Nate Low could do better than Carlos Santana. Even since Low has been on the Rangers, you're looking at like 75 RBIs a season, 18 homers, 27 homers, 17 homers. So low 20s homers and mid 70s RBIs. Like that's what Carlos Santana does. Here's the other issues with Nate Low. 3.6% barrel rate right now. That is the lowest barrel rate of his career, and his barrel rate has gone down 3 straight years in a row. 35% ideal contact rate, again, lowest of his career, 31st percentile in all of baseball. So really not good there. 53% ground ball rate, just like thumping the ball into the ground. Also the lowest pull rate for him since 2021. Not pulling the ball, hitting tons of ground balls, chasing outside of the zone more. Now 27% O swing is not crazy, but he's chasing out of the zone more, making more contact and making way less meaningful contact. So yeah, it's great. His swinging strike rate is down. Yeah, it's great. He's making more contact. He's not making contact on pitches that he can drive at all. He's making contact on pitches he drives into the ground. And I'm sorry, Eddie, I totally disagree that Carlos Santana could get DFA'd. Like it's not, I don't think it's going to happen. Like, this is a team that's competing to make the playoffs right now. And Santana has been one of their better hitters. Brooks Lee is getting reps at second base right now because they want Brooks Lee to play second in the immediate with Carlos Correa in town. So I don't think Brooks Lee coming up has any impact on Carlos Santana. I think Brooks Lee coming up would have an impact on Willie Castro and moving Willie Castro back around to kind of like a super utility role. But I think we are being way too negative on Carlos Santana, who was better than Nate Lowe last year. Like he was better. Yes, he hit 240 last year, and Nate Lowe last year hit 262. But Santana had 23 homers, Nate Lowe had 17. Santana had 86 RBIs, Nate Lowe had 82. Santana stole 6 bases last year, Nate Lowe stole 1. Like Santana was a better player last year, is a better player this year, is in a lineup hitting in the middle of the lineup on a team that's contending. Like, I get he's boring and he's old, but like Nate Lowe is boring and young. And I don't see anything in Nate Lowe's profile that makes me excited to have him on my roster.
If you have the tab open, close it. Because I want you to guess how many games Carlos Santana has played in his career.
Total games,
amount of baseball games.
Played. I know he's 38 years old, so I know that like there's a ton, and it's a
jaw-dropping figure.
I don't know that he strikes me as somebody who gets injured. So like, if I can't do math in my head, but if I could do an average of 140 games a season over whatever 38 years is in a career, like I think it's that. Like I think it's a total boatload of games.
He's played 2,000 games. He's 313 career homers and over 1,000 runs and RBIs apiece. And it's just he's not fun. He's not sexy at all. And I think there maybe is, again, like if something goes horribly wrong for Carlos Santana in the next 45 days, there's a minor chance he gets DFA'd, maybe, but just someone who's been hitting regularly 4th, 5th, or 6th in this lineup, more 5th or 6th, it's unlikely. He's 20% better than league average. Like, something would have to be catastrophic for him to be off this team. I think the Brooks Lee news comes as more of a deterrent to Edouard Julien rather than someone like Carlos Santana, who's a regular, who's in this lineup every single day, who's playing against lefties too. It's just there's nothing. I don't know what could take Carlos Santana out of this lineup. But I think and the thing that made Nate Lowe better last year was just the rising tide of the Rangers lineup lifting all the boats. The fact that he got to about 170 combined runs and RBIs, it's not going to happen this year. This is not the same team. Santana will probably just produce better for you from a position that is deep, but not as deep as you probably thought it was on draft day.
Yeah. Yes. And Aaron Gleeman, who writes about the Twins for The Athletic, said that directly, that Brooks Lee now just needs to beat Edouard Julien back to the majors. Like that is Brooks Lee's path, is proving he's a better second baseman than Edouard Julien. And I think that's honestly, sadly, not a high bar from what we've seen from Julien at the major league level. Rhino is asking, says Jared Kellick had another good week last week. Is he pretty much a must start in all leagues going forward? Yes. I mean, he's the leadoff hitter for the Braves. He's playing well. Even if he never gets back to the otherworldly prospect he was, like he's been a very solid major league regular this season in a prominent spot in a good lineup right now.
The amount of pain it brings me that the Brave season was fully saved by Chris Sale and Jared Kellick is just painful. And he's been on such a tear since getting moved to leadoff. He's cut his strikeout rate to below 25%. His ISO is up over 250. Like, he's doing everything that you kind of always expected him to do. And it seems like he finally has the confidence and the support system to do it. It seemed like there was just this weird thing happening for him. And I don't know, that for him in Seattle. Now it's even ironic that he's going to have a better season than Julio Rodriguez, which is it's just again, makes me so sad and so angry. But there's no way you could ever take Jared Kellick out of fantasy lineup right now. If anybody, take the name away, take the pedigree away, was leading off the Atlanta Braves, you'd have them starting without fail every single week in your lineup. They're hitting ahead of Austin Riley, Marcell Ozuna, and Ozzie Albies. And Matt Olson. He's producing at an incredibly high clip right now, and it's likely he will for the rest of the summer.
Yeah, I agree there. Basebone asks, in a standard 12-team 5x5, how would you rank Michael Toglia, Harrison Bader, Jose Siri?
I weirdly annoying. I'm a Coors Field hunter in my leagues through and through, especially daily leagues. Like I'll always keep rotating bench spots for guys like Toglia. Charlie Blackmon still hit a home run last night. His 38th birthday, had him in way too many lineups. But in games where he's not playing Coors, he's last on that list. Harrison Bader, from watching him every day, he's playing tremendous baseball right now. He's hitting, I think he's about 12% better than league average with the bat. He got 11. He stole 2 more bases last night to bring him to around 12 or 13 on the season. He never comes out of the Mets lineup because 1, Starling Marte is injured. 2, they have no outfield depth whatsoever in the 40-man roster. And 3, he's still a tremendous defensive outfielder on a team that needs help. The pitching needs help any way it can get. And yesterday, in a game where Brandon Nimmo had a freak injury and fell and slipped in his hotel room and cut his head, Harrison Bader moved up to second in the lineup. So it's clear that the team also values him very highly, both sides of the ball. So I think he's far ahead of the other 2 on that list for 5x5. And then Toglia, if he's in at home, and I guess Siri, I can't do the Jose Siri thing again, but Toglia at home, I still think is fun enough.
Yeah, I agree with you on. I took some shots on Toglia this week at home. Yeah. In leagues where I needed to replace guys like Bryce Harper or something like that. Like, and I'll take a gamble. The batting average isn't going to be good even when he's hitting home runs at home. Siri, the same thing. Like Siri's strikeout rate over this hot stretch is still like 39%. Like
terrible.
His plate discipline is awful. He also is not running even now when he's hitting home runs. So it's not like we're getting the stolen bases and the homers together at the same time. Bader, I agree with everything you said. It dovetails with MP31 is like, should we be paying attention to Harrison Bader? Yeah. And yes, you should get a look in 5 outfield leagues. Like I've added him in a bunch of NFBC online championships. Those are 12-team leagues. Like, who knows what's going to happen when Starling Marte comes back, but that's a while away. And like right now, I care about Harrison Bader is playing, and he's playing well, and he was playing when Marte was healthy. So I don't think the return of Marte is just going to push him out of the lineup. Bader has battled his own injuries in the past. So yeah, maybe he'll get dinged up, but like that's not a problem for now, right? You're not drafting Harrison Bader. You're not sitting in the 13th round of your draft being like, should I take Harrison Bader? You're looking at like, should I add him off waivers? And yes, you should, because he's playing well right now and is giving you a little bit of everything in a lineup that is surging. And yeah, these are the type of waiver moves that you make.
He's had 6 off days since June 1st. So he still is missing about a game a week, but that game a week, a lot of that was while Starling Marte was healthy. Since Marte went down, he's played every game but one, where the Mets were playing just a bullpen game by the Astros, started with a righty, and decided to get Ben Gamble some reps. Him and DJ Stewart, neither of them have looked that impressive. So every single day it gets a little bit more difficult to take Bader out of this lineup. It's just good. There's nothing really that can fully unseat Bader in the near future from this Mets team, unless they make a trade for an outfielder, which also would be surprising. But I think that would also tell us more about Starling Marte than Harrison Bader.
Yeah, I like that call. Rhino says David Hamilton came out of the gate hot, but has really cooled off and sat a couple of times. Ride with him or pick up a guy like Nick Gonzalez who plays every day. First of all, I would not be picking up Nick Gonzalez. We'll go over David Hamilton first, but like Nick Gonzalez is also trending in the wrong direction. But yeah, like look, over the last 16 games, David Hamilton's hitting 230. But just a 22% strikeout rate over that point in time, 257 BABIP. So a little bit of that is unlucky. Guys that run like David Hamilton don't usually post BABIPs that are in the 250s because their batting out, their speed can usually, help to kind of like beat out some of those infield hits. But this is why you're rostering him. He has 8 steals over those 16 games, even though he's hitting 230, right? That's why he's on your team, because he runs. I don't like, if you looked at his profile and his minor league profile, he was never going to hit 280, 290, right? He's never been that type of batting average guy in the past. Could he be a 240 hitter from here on out? Could he finish the season around a 250 batting average? Yes, he could. And he's hitting second for the Red Sox. And sure, he gets sit every once in a while, but that's because Manuel Valdez right now is riding a heater. And so and he also is left-handed. And so they're playing him at second base some games and giving Hamilton a day off. I personally don't think Manuel Valdez is somebody who is going to continue to like really need to force his way into the lineup. Again, he may play every now and then, but you're talking about Hamilton sitting like once in a while. He's playing 4 or 5 games a week. The speed is still there. He could still easily be like a full season 10 homer, 40 stolen base guy with a 250 batting average. Like if you need steals, you're keeping him on your team.
Yeah, the Emmanuel Valdez point I think is the most relevant because most teams will not platoon a shortstop because usually the shortstop is kind of like he's captain in the infield, he's your best defensive player. But the fact that the Red Sox have found a way to do that with Hamilton and Ceddanne Rafaela means that they don't take a lot of stock in Hamilton's. Not they don't take a lot of stock in his defense necessarily, but they don't take a lot of stock in his future prospects as their shortstop. Like they're still a team
Right.
sans shortstop. So the fact that Rafaela will play there and they'll move Hamilton to second base or put Hamilton on the bench means that realistically at this given moment, because of how he's been hitting, it's a Hamilton versus Valdez position battle. And Valdez is not, he's not, I don't think he's exceptional, but he's a guy who has some great minor league numbers and can't get hot. The key with Hamilton is just you might have to sustain a long cold spell and possibly a lot of off days for the chance that you get the heater in August like we had in June, where you just get 15 steals in 25 games. Because that could happen again. It might not be like a trickle to get the David Hamilton production the rest of the year. You might have to go through take some lumps to get the next stolen base barrage, which is like if you can just have patience for that.
Yeah, and listen, the Red Sox aren't going to – I mean, the shortstop of the future is likely Marcelo Meyer. They're not – like they're playing Rafael at short right now because he can play short. David Hamilton is playing primarily second base, which, you know, I guess you could have a conversation of like what happens when Vaughn Grissom is off the IL. You know, they traded Chris Sale to get Vaughn Grissom. They wanted him in the lineup, but Vaughn Grissom was struggling a little bit. He's only 24 years old. Like the Red Sox could very easily keep Vaughn Grissom in the minors for this year and hope that he can be, you know, their second baseman in the future. I will say, like, over this same stretch, Nick Gonzalez hitting 234
bad
with 1 home run, 4 RBIs, 1 steal, and a 27% strikeout rate. So, yes, Nick Gonzalez is playing every day, but even in a downward stretch, David Hamilton is giving you more fantasy value because of the spot in the lineup itself, the speed, and a little bit of pop. So,
yeah. This reminds me of this time of year in 2022 when John Burley had a June where he stole about 20 bases, similar to David Hamilton. It might have been between June and May. And then the Marlins started sitting him and moving him around. He wasn't playing. I was in a daily set league, and I wound up dropping John Burley. And then someone who I was directly competing with wound up picking him up for an August, September when he stole about 20 more bases. Maybe it was 2021. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it's like for these bunny type players who don't have a lot of offensive production, who don't have a premium defensive label, it goes up and down. Like the way that power hitters go on homer hot streaks, like David Hamilton can go on a speed hot streak. Mm-hmm. And if your opportunity cost is Nick Gonzalez, probably worth just keeping him around because you want that influx of stolen bases whenever it may come.
Yeah. A couple more here to end. We got a Twitch question in. We ask the questions on Twitch. They're great. Is Shane Baz going to play soon, and is he worth trading for? I hope so.
Yeah.
And yes. I mean, at the start of the season, the Rays had said, or Rays beat writers had reported that the Rays were thinking about Baz being in the big leagues in July to finish the season. That would basically give him about 100 MLB innings, which I think was the kind of the thought going into the year. I still think that could happen. He has been lights out in his last few starts in the majors. He's also been going 6+ innings. The secondaries have really picked up. And also, like, Zach Littell has not been good, right? Like Zach Littell has solid stats on the season, a 4.17 ERA on the season, which are, you know, fine. Nothing that's like extraordinary. But a 6 ERA in 24 innings in June, you know, a 5.90 slugging allowed in June. This is a guy who was a reliever for the vast majority of his career before Tampa tried to turn him into a starter because they were desperate last year with all their injuries. Like, I don't think it's going to take that many more poor starts for them to move Zach Littell back to like a multi-inning relief role and call Shane Baz up to let him start. Aaron Savali also has been terrible. They traded for him. I don't know that they're going to bump him out of the rotation, but like I think it happens this month. I think it could happen next week. Like, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic there, but I really do think like it's going to happen before Max Meyer is going to happen is my take. And I think Shane Baz has like a lot of upside as a strikeout pitcher. And so I'd be looking to get him if you could.
I'll push back on the Littell point briefly because he's only had one start since the middle of May that they allowed more than 3 runs, and that was a game in Atlanta that actually recapped for Rotoworld, and he just got crushed. Matt Olson, Austin Riley, that was the game the Braves offense kind of started to come alive. I think it was on a Friday night or Wednesday, maybe. I don't remember, but he's still been fine. Otherwise, the strikeouts and walks are still where you'd want them to be for a guy like Littell. It's not elite like it was, but he's still not giving a lot of free passes. Still striking out around league average quantity of hitters over his last 6-7 starts. He's still getting to 5-6 innings. He even had 2 quality starts against the Orioles mixed in there. I think the key for Baz will be if the Rays actually go ahead and trade Zach Eflin. I think that's the spot that seems obvious. I don't know if it's going to happen. It's been lightly rumored, but Littell's kind of the thing that's fully stopping him right now. And I still don't think he's bad enough for them to bump.
I guess that's just like, maybe if the, like the Rays right now, let's see. Yeah. The 500, 11 games out of the division, but they're only, they're in the wild card hunt. They're 2.5 games behind the Red Sox. So they're in a wild card race. I just don't know if like getting, 5 innings out of Zach Littell where he gives up 2 runs and strikes out 5 is like, oh, I have to keep this guy in the lineup if I'm pushing for a playoff spot. I also I know, there are comments here about Jeffrey Springs in the rotation. I don't know that Jeffrey Springs comes back into the rotation. Remember that Jeffrey Springs is another guy who was a reliever until Tampa made him a starting pitcher. So he has a lot of experience as a reliever. He's coming off Tommy John surgery. They're going to be very cautious with his innings. I wouldn't be surprised if Jeffrey Springs is used in like 3 inning stints here and there once he makes it back for the remainder of this season. I think he is a starter long term. I'm not saying like Tampa Bay won't keep Springs out of the rotation next year, but I think Jeffrey Springs this year, who still is only threw 3 innings his last start. So Springs still needs to build his way back up. You're looking at probably like August for Springs, maybe like the last week of July. So he only might have 2 months on the MLB roster. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they use Springs for 3 innings here, there, 4 innings here, there, and not as like a traditional starter. And maybe that's part of the way they get both these guys in. Maybe they go to a 6-man rotation and they can use Jeffrey Springs to piggyback on some of the Savali starts or some of the Littell starts or whatever. There's a lot up in the air. As you mentioned, the Zach Eflin trade rumors. If the Rays over the next 3 weeks or whatever fall a little bit further out of the playoff race, we know they're a team that doesn't want to spend tons of money, so they'll restock and they might trade some of these guys, which might be Eflin, which might be Savali, which might be Littell. Like it could be any of these guys. But I still think to the question posed here, like I would be adding Shane Baz because I think he's going to be up soon.
Yeah,
or wrong.
Yeah, just possibly the same thing that you're saying with Springs. That's the way they could deploy Baz potentially, correct?
Yeah, for sure.
I know it's also being really weird right now. Am I coming through poorly?
No, you're fine. I heard sirens. Okay. Yes, I think it's more like the Springs has a track record as a reliever, so they might, and he is older, right? Baz is a young prospect. Yeah. So they might feel more comfortable having Springs in a relief role for the remainder of this year, just because he's done it before, and it wouldn't be like a total recalibration. And also, if he's built up to 4 innings, 5 innings, you could call him up sooner and say, hey, you're basically up to 4 innings right now. Like, we're just going to use you at 4 innings. And then we'll see what happens in, August, September. But like that also enables them to use Jeffrey Springs sooner rather than having him get fully all the way built up.
I also think weirdly Rasmussen's in a similar bucket. He also probably comes back as a reliever. I think he's less far along in Springs, but it's just they're just as always, they're gonna patch the thing together. And it's always hard to stash a Ray because you never know exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah, that is tough. The Rasmussen thing again. Yes, another reliever. We're talking about injury stashes, so we've mentioned some of these. Dad asked before, are there any good injury stashes you recommend other than Devin Williams? We just talked about Jeffrey Springs, who is one. I think the upside might be a little more limited. I like stashing Robbie Ray right now. I think Robbie Ray. We know Robbie Ray is slotting back into the Giants rotation. Yes, command is the last thing to come back after Tommy John, and command is already an issue for Robbie Ray, so that is mildly concerning. I don't think you can stash Kodai Senga anywhere, but he's probably stashed already. But that's one for sure. Like, I would be checking in on that to see if he was somebody that I could stash. Tristan Casas, same thing. He is nearing. He's starting to swing again, so I think he's nearing a return. I don't know that he was like dropped in many places. I don't know if there's anybody that jumps out to you.
Is he actually starting to swing? Casa said he was mentally swinging, so I don't know. Is he physically swinging yet?
He's physically swinging now. He was the mentally swinging was during his rehab. Was he getting swings in? And he said mentally he was getting swings in. Yes.
1,000 mental reps. But I think there's another sneaky stash right now. You're probably, again, not a 12-team guy, more of a 15-team, or if you have room on a keeper dynasty team. But DL Hall has been throwing in the minor leagues. Yeah. His velocity is way up compared to where it was in the season. And it's kind of leaked out a little bit from Brewers Brass that the knee thing that he went on the IL with might have been an issue that was lingering, and they tried to get through it, and they couldn't get through it. His velocity in his last few rehab assignments in his short outings was closer to the levels it was last season when he was with the Orioles. So we've seen the Brewers work short-term magic with pitchers like this before, and there's spots in that rotation to jump into. So I think he's someone that you might be able to catch a little on top with, along with the two Padres who were kind of easing their way back, Darvish sooner and Musgrove much later.
Yeah, I will say it is July 2nd, and Tyler Mahle is supposed to begin his rehab assignment with the Rangers in AAA Round Rock today. That was the report, whether that actually comes out or not. So Mahle is somebody who will probably rejoin the Rangers rotation, let's say August or something. He's been intriguing in the past. We know he has his warts. He's not, but he is moving to a really good pitcher's park with an organization that I trust. His teammate, Jacob deGrom, deGrom started throwing bullpens at the beginning of June. We know he's going to work his way back. If you're talking about who am I stashing for, the end of the season, I think it's a major swing. It may lead to nothing, but if you have an IL spot and you want to take a major swing, if you're feeling good about your team and you're just trying to, hit the best possible outcome, there's a chance you get 5 starts from deGrom at the end of the season, 6 starts from deGrom at the end of the season. If the Rangers remain in contention and they keep him on this track, and I think that could be worth it. I also in AL tout. I mean, it's AL only, but in AL tout, I stashed Luis Garcia of the Astros. I think he's nearing a return. There's certainly a spot in that rotation. Spencer Arrighetti has been fine, but I don't think Spencer Arrighetti's keeping Luis Garcia out of the rotation. And so, I think Luis Garcia is another one that you could add.
DeGrom one's weird because if that team fully falls out of contention, I see almost no way he pushes it to get to the end of the year.
Yeah.
I was thinking sometimes we forget about hitter stashes. I think this comes up a lot more in NFBC leagues where if a hitter's out for a month, they're going to get dropped. I grabbed Francisco Alvarez in mind when he got dropped and just stashed him on the bench for 4 weeks, and now the rewards are unbelievable. So a guy like Mike Trout will stand out to me where you could get a 6-week heater from Mike Trout that could really change everything. Lars Nootbaar just started the rehab assignment. Not as exciting, of course, but just someone who you might get more production you're expecting out of your 4th or 5th outfielder spot if you got a guy like Nootbaar up there.
Yeah, Nootbaar certainly interesting. Tommy Edman, I guess slightly coming back. Who knows what's going to happen there? Yeah. Xander Bogaerts starting to swing again. I don't really know what type of upside you're getting with him. He wasn't playing particularly well, and the power was diminishing, and he now has a fractured left shoulder blade that he's playing through or dealing with. So I think that is a little bit concerning as well. But again, Bogaerts, is going to probably come back into an everyday role when he comes back off of injury. I don't see any reason why they would bring him back unless they're fully ready to play him. And so, deeper formats, I could see some upside there. But, I think I think Bogaerts is. I understand that the year last year was good. I think we knew we were going to see a little bit of a batting average decline leaving Fenway, but so much of what made Bogaerts good last year was the speed. He was running less this year. I don't know that they're going to run him a lot coming back off a fractured shoulder blade, because most of the time you're sliding to second base, you're sliding head first, and a lot of pressure when you touch the bag can come into the shoulder, hard tags on the shoulder, whatever it is. I just don't think for a 31-year-old coming off a fractured shoulder blade, they're going to push it too much. And so you're looking at like a guy who's a 15 homer, 270, 280 hitter who might not run as much. And again, I think in deeper formats, that's fine, but I don't think he's like a must add.
No, the injury stash game is hard. A lot of times it's just like, sometimes it's just not that worth it. I don't know. You got to be able to really time it right and kind of get a little bit lucky to make these worth it, especially if you're in a roster with no IL spots.
Yeah. And listen, I think the Padres were telling us everything when they were saying that they were thinking about also maybe moving Xander Bogaerts to first base because they have a talented shortstop prospect coming up who is, why am I blanking on his name?
Was it not Jackson Merrill? And now I moved to the outfield.
They moved Jackson Merrill to the outfield. I thought there was another. Maybe it was Jackson Merrill, and then they moved him to the outfield anyway. I'd have to go back and like look at all their prospects.
They have Leonidas DeVry, but he's a child.
Yeah, he is a full on child. He is a ways away. But they had rumors about like, are they going to try to move Xander Bogaerts to first? And like, this is the guy I think that is on the fringes of starting in fantasy. And so he'll play, but I don't know what he's going to give you per se.
No,
I do. Oh, there you are. Did you? You look like you froze a little bit. James did freeze. But you know what? We're at almost an hour here, so we're gonna get out of here anyway. Thanks for all your questions for today. Please make sure to check this out again. Every Tuesday we're here, 1 p.m. Myself, James Schiano. You can follow us on Twitter. We lost James. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Samulski NYC. James is at James Schiano. Make sure to check us out. You can ask us any questions on there if you get a chance. My Mixing It Up article is coming out on NBC Sports tomorrow, Wednesday morning. I'm looking at some pitch mix changes for Brandon Pfaadt and for Luis Ortiz, and digging into the David Festa debut. So make sure you check that out. Enjoy your July 4th holiday. Enjoy the weekend. And we will see you guys next Tuesday again for the Rotoworld Baseball Q&A.